Welcome back, everyone. Before we get into today's story, I want to tell you exactly what's waiting for you in the next few minutes. This is going to be a complete, honest, and detailed look at the 1965 Volvo P1800, from the way it looks and feels to what it's like inside, to how it drives, what it's like to actually own one, where it struggles, where it shines, what it costs today, whether it's worth the money, and how it truly stacks up against the sports cars people usually mention in the same breath. So, if you want the full picture before you form your own opinion, stay with me until the end, because there's a detail near the finish that changes how you'll see this car forever. Now, imagine for a moment that somewhere, tucked inside a leather-bound folder in a Swedish workshop, a letter has been sitting since 1965, waiting. Not meant to be read then, meant to be read now. And today, we're finally opening it. To whoever is reading this, it begins. I don't know what the world looks like where you are. I don't know if roads still curve the way they did in my time, or if engines still breathe the way I did. But I know why I was built, and I want you to understand it before you judge me by today's standards. Back in the early 60s, Volvo was known for one thing: sensible, sturdy, almost stubbornly practical cars. Boxy sedans built for Scandinavian winters, not glamour. So when the P1800 arrived, it felt like a quiet rebellion. A Swedish company, famous for safety and seriousness, suddenly building something with sweeping curves, a long hood, and a silhouette that looked like it belonged on a coastal road in Italy, rather than a factory floor in Gothenburg. It wasn't trying to out-muscle Jaguar or out-glamour a Ferrari. It was trying to prove that a car could be beautiful and dependable at the same time, and back then, that idea alone felt almost radical. You'll notice my shape first, the letter continues. That long nose, those narrow taillights, the way my roofline slopes without ever feeling heavy. I wasn't drawn to shout, I was drawn to be looked at twice. And that's still true today. Stand next to a P1800 in person, and you understand instantly why this is the car that made James Bond briefly step outside his usual sports car loyalty, and why decades later, collectors still describe it as one of the most elegant shapes to ever come out of Sweden. It doesn't try to be aggressive, it tries to be timeless, and somehow, 60 years later, it still pulls that off. Step inside, and the story shifts from beauty to intimacy. My cabin was never about luxury, the letter admits. It was about connection. Every dial, every switch, every stitch was placed so the driver felt like they were part of the machine, not just sitting inside it. There's no infotainment screen, no digital cluster, none of the technology we associate with cars today, and that's exactly the point. This was an era where driving meant reading analog gauges, feeling the road through the wheel, and trusting your own senses instead of a computer's. For someone stepping into a P1800 today, after years of touchscreens and driver assistance systems, it feels almost meditative, quiet, mechanical, honest. And speaking of honesty, the letter doesn't shy away from its own limitations either. I won't lie to you, it says. I don't have the technology your world relies on. No lane assist, no automatic braking, no cameras watching your blind spots. In my time, safety meant a strong body structure and a driver who paid attention. That's a real shift worth sitting with. Volvo, the brand now synonymous with cutting-edge safety innovation, built this car in an era before seatbelt laws were even standardized in most countries. The P1800 represents the beginning of that safety obsession, not the peak of it, and understanding that context changes how you evaluate it. Then comes the part the letter seems proudest of. Under my hood, you won't find outrageous horsepower. What you'll find is balance. The P1800 was never about brute force. Its inline-4 engine offered modest performance by today's standards, but paired with lightweight construction and a chassis tuned for control rather than chaos, it created something rarer than raw speed: confidence. Drivers of the era often described it as a car that made you feel skilled, not overwhelmed. It rewarded smooth inputs rather than punishing hesitation, and that philosophy still defines how it feels on the road today. Modern drivers who expect turbocharged urgency are often surprised to discover that the P1800's appeal isn't about how fast it goes, it's about how good it feels getting there. On the road, the letter continues, you'll feel every curve talk back to you. My steering isn't assisted by electronics, it's assisted by trust. And that's the real emotional core of driving one of these cars today. There's no filter between you and the mechanical experience. The suspension isn't tuned to isolate you from the road, it's tuned to include you in it. For someone raised on modern, comfort-focused engineering, that can feel demanding at first, almost old-fashioned. But give it time, and it becomes addictive. This is a car that asks for your attention and rewards it generously. Of course, living with a car like this today isn't without its challenges, and the letter is refreshingly upfront about that too. I wasn't built to be effortless in your world, it admits. Parts can be harder to find. Maintenance requires patience, not convenience. I don't have the forgiving nature of a modern daily driver. That's the honest trade-off of P1800 ownership. It's not a car for someone who wants stress-free transportation. It's a car for someone who wants a relationship with their vehicle, one that requires care, understanding, and a willingness to get your hands a little dirty in the name of preserving something meaningful. And that brings us to value, because this is where the story gets genuinely interesting. Depending on condition and originality, a well-preserved 1965 Volvo P1800 today can range anywhere from the mid-$20,000 range for driver-quality examples to well over $60,000 or $70,000 for pristine, low-mileage documented cars, with exceptional or record-holding examples occasionally reaching even higher. Compared to something like a Jaguar E-Type from the same era, which often commands significantly higher prices for similar condition, the P1800 has long lived in the shadow of flashier rivals, which, ironically, makes it one of the more attainable entry points into classic European sports car ownership. It offers similar era charm, similar mechanical simplicity, and arguably superior long-term reliability, all while remaining comparatively underappreciated in the collector market, at least for now. I know I was never the loudest car in the room, the letter says near its end. I was never the fastest, never the most powerful, never the one people pointed at first, but I was the one that kept going. Long after flashier cars broke down or faded into obscurity, I was still on the road, still being driven, still being loved. And that line captures something essential about the P1800's legacy. This isn't a car remembered for dominating a racetrack or setting a lap record. It's remembered for reliability that became legendary. For one owner famously driving a single P1800 well past 3 million miles, an achievement that still stands as proof of just how mechanically honest and enduring this car really is. So here's what I want you to take from this, the letter concludes. I wasn't perfect, I wasn't the fastest or the most advanced, but I was built with intention, driven with passion, and somehow I outlasted almost everyone's expectations, including my own makers. If you're reading this, it means I made it. It means the story continued. And as strange as it sounds, that's exactly the feeling you get spending time around a 1965 P1800 today. It's not just a car, it's a message that survived, one that still has something honest to say about what driving used to mean, and maybe about what it still could mean. If this story pulled you in the way it pulled me in, that's exactly why I make these videos, to find the cars that still have something to say decades later. So if you enjoyed uncovering this one with me, hit like, subscribe if you're new here, and drop a comment telling me which classic deserves to have its letter opened next. Because somewhere out